So today we're going to talk about adding and subtracting rational expressions. And that just means adding and subtracting fractions. So my first one says 1/2 plus 1/3. And we know from our experience with fractions that we need to get a common denominator. Okay? And so the common denominator here, I could just multiply 2 times 3 and get a common denominator of 6. And so I can use 6 as my denominator. Now my first term, 1/2, in order to get 6, I need to multiply the bottom by 3. And whatever I multiply the bottom by, I need to multiply the top by. So 3 times 1 and 2 times 6 would be 3/6. My second fraction, again, I need a common denominator of 6. So I'm going to multiply by 2, top and bottom. So 2 times 1 is 2, and then 3 times 2 is 6. Now I can add my fractions. They have a common denominator. I keep the denominator, and I add the numerators to get 5/6. So I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to have a little bit different type of problems, though. We'll have variables around. So let's take a look at number 2. I have 4/3y plus 7/3y. Well, I already have a common denominator of 3y. So I leave my common denominator there, and I have 4 plus 7 is 11, and then I'm done. Number 3, I have, again, a common denominator already. So I'm going to keep my common denominator. And what I have for my numerator is 3x plus x. So 3x plus x is 4x. And so my answer is 4x over x plus 2. Now for all three of these examples, it was easy to see the common denominator, or easy to get the common denominator, and I just add the numerators. So let's take a look at down here. So my next one is, I have 7x plus 5 over 3x squared minus x minus 2, and I'm going to subtract the fraction of 4x squared plus 3, but I have the same denominator. So let's take a look at how that looks. We are going to keep our denominator. So 3x squared minus x minus 2 is my denominator. And what I'll do is, now I'll just combine the numerators. I have 7x plus 5. And I'm taking away this entire fraction. So I'm going to subtract 4x plus 3. I added parentheses to remind me that I'm subtracting the entire expression. So what I end up with here is 7x plus 5 minus 4x minus 3, because I distributed that negative sign, and it's all over 3x squared minus x minus 2. So let's combine our like terms. I have 7x minus 4x, so that's 3x. I have 5 minus 3, that's plus 2. And in my denominator, I can actually factor that. And if I factor that, see what I get? I get 3x plus 2, and I have x minus 1. And you might notice that I have a 3x plus 2 and a 3x plus 2. So I am going to just add parentheses because the numerator can stay together. And I have 3x plus 2 over 3x plus 2. I can cancel those, and I end up with 1 over x minus 1. And that would be my final answer. So again, I have a common denominator. In this case, I'm subtracting my fraction, so I have to distribute that negative sign, and then I'm going to be careful about my like terms, and then I'm going to factor so that I can cancel something out. So now let's try a couple without a common denominator. My first one is 5/6x plus 3/2x squared. So I have, I need a common denominator. So my least common denominator will be, let's look at 6 and 2. Well, the least common denominator between 6 and 2 would be 6. And I have x and x squared. The least common denominator will be x squared. So that's what I need. I need to have a denominator of 6x squared. Since I already have 6x, I would just need to multiply that by x. That'll give me 6x squared. And if I multiply the denominator by that, I have to multiply the numerator by that. So this fraction becomes 5x. Over here, I also need 6x squared. So 2 times 3 would give me the 6, and I already have my x squared, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 3. 3 times 3 is 9, and I'm adding these. So now I have my common denominator, 6x squared, and I'm just going to add my numerators, 5x plus 9, and nothing can reduce, so that's my final answer. Now this next one, it's kind of similar in that I need a common denominator that I do not see here, and just like I did my original fraction, I can multiply those two pieces together. And it might be easier to see if I put parentheses there. So my least common denominator would be those two pieces multiplied together. So that will be my common denominator. So let's look at my first fraction here. I want the common denominator of d minus 1 times d plus 2. So I need to multiply this denominator by d plus 2. And I have to do it top and bottom. Okay, remember I do that top and bottom because d plus 2 over d plus 2 will cancel to give me just 1, so I'm really not multiplying it by anything other than 1. But what I do now is I have a common denominator. So 3, I'm going to write parentheses d plus 2 is my first fraction. Then I'm going to subtract. Again, I have my common denominator, d minus 1, d plus 2. And I already have the d plus 2, so I need to multiply d minus 1 for both the numerator and the denominator there. And so I have minus 2 times d minus 1. Okay, so now let's combine like terms. My denominator stays the same, d minus 1, d plus 2. And in my numerator, I have 3d. I'm distributing that. And I have 3 times 2 is plus 6. Now I'm distributing the negative 2. Negative 2d minus 2d. Negative 2 times negative 1 is a positive 2. So now let's put those together. 3d minus 2d is just d. 6 plus 2 is going to be 8. So in the numerator, I have d plus 8. In my denominator, I have d minus 1 times d plus 2. And nothing can factor and cancel here, so that's my final answer. So what we want to do is get a common denominator. I'm going to get a common denominator and then add or subtract. And that's all we're going to do for today. Okay, so let's give those a try.